Modern CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping accounting firms achieve success. If you're an accounting firm owner who wants to learn how to provide virtual CFO services, then this podcast is for you.
Welcome to episode 7. Today, we are joined by a very special guest, David Danic. He is the tax director here at Summit CPA. So obviously, with that said, our topic today is how to integrate tax services in with CFO services. So I think this is a really interesting topic. I know when I started at Summit CPA, this was something that surprised me with how we used our tax services. So I'll let Dave and Adam's here as well. I'll let those two kind of go into how that works. But Dave, let's start with you. How did you meet Adam, and how did this relationship start?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jamie. I met Adam at a conference probably about 8 years ago, and it was a small business accounting conference through the CPA Society. And they were talking about, we're trying to think about going into the CFO services and whatnot. And I thought it was really neat, because I was in a very traditional firm at the time. Yeah, I just didn't really see where my career was going. We talked about me perhaps working at Summit CPA Group. It just didn't work out as initially. And then just with good
That's not how I remember it, Dave. Yeah. That's not how I remember it. But here's the real story. He and I bonded over the fact that in this room, there were a lot of older CPAs that were looking to get out. It was about transition planning. And they were talking about how the younger generation, which at that time, 8 years ago, I don't know that I would qualify. Dave's a few years younger than me. So he was probably in his 20s at the time. So I probably just broke the 30 threshold. But they were talking about how the next generation really couldn't handle the transition. Like, how are they going to afford to, they don't want to work 100 hours a week. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. And Dave really stood out to me because not only was he, kind of representing that next generation of firm owners and leaders, but he was making a lot of sense. He wasn't just, he was saying, hey, I'm willing to do this and I'm willing to do that. It wasn't just a lot of whining or placating or anything like that. So afterwards, we just told him a little bit about what we did and our vision, in terms of the VCFO services and how that all fit. And, just kind of talk through that kind of stuff. And as Dave mentioned, it just, at the time it didn't work out. So we just stayed in touch.
Yeah. Networking. So each year we just hit each other up on LinkedIn and see what was going. And my career evolved because I sucked at audit. I didn't like it. So then eventually I just started really gravitating towards taxes, and they needed someone to run their tax department. And I said, you know what, at this phase of my life, especially with remote work and things of that nature, it's a good time for me to jump in and help Summit CPA.
So how long did it take from that first meeting for you to come start working with Summit?
Oh, it was probably, like the initial meeting when I first met Adam. It was like conference. 8 years. Yeah, I played hard to get. They played hard to get,
So. Like, we don't need him.
Yeah.
Taxes. Who does taxes? Why would we want a tax guy?
It was really neat. Adam and I have a very similar sense of humor. We have a pretty similar MO. So it was a really, as Adam said, when there's a bunch of gray hairs, at the meeting, it was, there was a lot of complaining. We're like, okay, well, we know we might want to change some things, but it's up to us to do it. So it evolved, and I joined Summit CPA Group. It was good.
Now we've got the gray hairs.
Now we've got the gray hairs. Yeah, that's me. Yeah. I hope I'm not offending people on the podcast, our listeners.
No, that's us.
We'll censor you out.
Totally.
So Adam, tell me when you approached Dave with this job, how did you approach it with him? What did you explain to him that this gig would be?
Well, the evolution was is that there were just certain aspects of the firm that Jody and I just weren't super passionate about. And we knew that in order for us to be successful in anything that we've ever done before, it's usually, revolves around our ability and want to do something. And so taxes are a natural fit with any accounting service. And it makes a lot of sense because it's a lot of planning, it's a lot of projections, and then there's the compliance piece of it, and everybody kind of has to go to you. So our thought is we need to find a champion, somebody that's passionate about it, really enjoys it, and can run with it. And, we wanted to give them, pretty much autonomy over the department. And so the first meeting, like whenever we were talking to him, we're like, okay, so here's the deal. We want you to be director, but We don't want you to grow the department. We don't want to do more tax returns.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of.
And I was hungry. Hey, I'm joining a new firm. I want to impress these people. I think I can bring in some clients. After the whole non-compete was up, I was like, this is going to work out just fine. And they're like, no. We don't want any more of those types of clients.
We don't want tax clients. We want you. So in Summit, in the virtual CFO services, then how it works is it's just a support system. So Dave and his team are essential part of our delivery on the VCFO side, but they're supporting the delivery. So again, we meet with our clients and we're doing planning and forecasting and all those kind of things. Naturally, tax has to be in part of that conversation. Mm-hmm. And so being able to pull the compliance off of our team, the leadership, managing the notices, making sure things are getting done on time and the right way, it's just been such a huge win for us and all the VCFOs. We have some VCFOs that know nothing about tax. They can bring Dave into the meeting. He adds weight to the conversation. He's another party in the room to say, hey, I've got this part handled. And then whenever there are items to be done post-meeting, he takes them and runs with them, which is, again, a huge relief for our VCFO as well, because they don't want to do that stuff.
So explain to me the idea. So when I was interviewing at Summit several years ago, I was interviewing with other companies as well. And a lot of companies said tax was the pathway to get your CFO clients. Why does Summit not think that? And why do we not go out and try to find tax clients and then convert them into to CFO clients from that direction?
Yeah, I mean, we do taxes for, I think, Dave, about 85% of our clients or so, right?
Yes.
And we probably, whenever we get opportunities, we lead first with the consulting piece. So we tell people, yeah, we're a CPA firm, but we're advisors. So we're business advisors first and then accountants. And then, of course, if you need the taxes done, that's, again, part of the delivery of planning. You got to make sure that you're setting aside money for taxes and doing the right thing. And everybody wants to, pay as little as possible. So having somebody that just solely focuses on that kind of thing is a huge advantage. But I would say that when clients come to us, again, they're coming to us for the consulting. And then whenever they find out we can do tax, about half of them are like, yeah, I don't really have a good relationship or a great relationship with my tax provider. I think that I'm going to go with you. By the time we get done with onboarding, like 6-8 weeks in, they're like, the other 50% of the people that don't sign up for tax are usually like, doesn't it make more sense for Dave just to be more involved and to do our taxes?
Yeah.
And so we're like,
we just had one of those calls. Yeah, for sure.
We get them all the time. And that other 15%, those are people that, their uncle does them or, they've got some other relationship that's established, not for any other reason, really.
And I don't know if this is going to happen, if it's a 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years down the line. But, I always think of my career as a tax professional as sometimes hanging in the balance of Congress saying, oh, we're going to quit, we're going to enact a fair tax or something like this. And I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but that was also when Jody and Adam started the firm saying, we're sick of hustling at this January through April madness and then get all this cash in, and then we have no cash in September. So as certainly a part of building the firm up to be more sustainable and protect itself from an event that could happen where it says CPAs don't do taxes anymore. So is it likely? I don't know, but it could happen. So,
and I would say even from there, I mean, one thing for a lot of CPA firms to think about too is sometimes it's just really good money. Like tax is just really good money. So it's hard to walk away from. And so I would never tell a CPA firm that I work with just to remove all their tax work. I would tell them to departmentalize it a little bit and do what we've done. I mean, we still have a handful of legacy clients that we, just work on their tax work. What we've been able to do is weed out the ones that are probably lower fee ones and work with more high net worth folks. And then we've increased the fees. So they're paying a good amount of money. And then, I think that, over time, they slowly become a smaller and smaller part of your practice. And
Jamie, you started that question by saying, how it's a feeder for CFO work if taxes are. So we've had a couple instances where we will bill pretty high for some of these tax returns that are new or coming in. And a part of that service is me checking in with them quarterly. if it's just tax work. And that is 3 times more than they're meeting with their previous accountant. And if I can give them some insight into their business, because I also just know how balance sheets and income statements work, and give them some direction from the CFO side. And so, yes, it can feed into that by saying, you know what, hey, if you meet with us monthly or bi-weekly on these cash flow issues, then it does ramp up to the CFO or controllership level work.
And that's primarily for smaller clients, Jamie. So if we get like a small client that just can't afford, to pay us $40,000 or $60,000 a year, but needs, somebody like Dave or our industry knowledge, then what we'll do is we'll put them on that path. And so they can, get to know us a little bit and work with Dave. And then as they grow, he hands them off to the VCFO side. So that's the only time whenever that really works. But the idea is really just to kind of grow the rest of the firm and then, slowly shrink those standalone clients. Like, we don't accept standalone clients. If somebody called us up and just said, hey, can you crank out it's got to be somebody's friend, or, it's got to be Dave laughs because he's like, yeah, whatever, Adam, I get a couple of those every now and again, but we try not to, I should say.
So if we're not, let's talk a little bit more, Dave, about your strategy with our CFO clients and with our controller clients. What do you do on a daily, monthly, weekly, yearly basis with those clients? How often do you meet with them? How often do you jump in on calls? When you are on those calls, what are the type of things you're talking about and asking them about?
I want to meet with our clients quarterly on the CFO side, just to give them a high-level overview of where we're seeing where their tax obligation is going to be. Tax work is not earth-shattering, rocket science type of work. I readily admit that. So we should really know what our clients are going to be paying in taxes pretty early in the process. So those quarterly meetings are just a review of how the last quarter's gone, what we anticipate their tax liability being, making sure estimates are paid and of that nature. And then as we get into the latter parts of the year, we can really start, one, with more data to see where they're going to end up. We can start more on the planning side of things. And what I've seen, particularly over the past few years, is that when we have like a significant year-end projection and planning meeting, I see a lot of the conversations going away from taxes, but more so financial planning, estate planning, things of that nature. So just the one I had last week as an example, this guy's going to owe a bunch of boatload in taxes, but we've prepared him for it. He's a great CFO client. We've talked about the tax reserve. Well, what more do you want me to say in this meeting? Well, we talked about how he has 2 kids. Do you have an estate plan? Okay, you paid off your debt. You paid off your house. What are you going to do with these profit distributions going forward? So it really allowed an avenue for us to just provide more of a value add, and then also hopefully lead into, as our firm goes more towards some financial planning services as well. So it's really a great opportunity to help grow the firm.
So more tax consulting at that point. So instead of just talking about this is what you're going to pay this year, it's more of like okay, how can we pay less, and what else kind of questions can I answer?
Yeah, those are natural questions that we're doing throughout the year of saying, okay, yes, you're going to owe X. How do I get you down by this? And the tax code is written that there's not many options away from what we do. So we'll cover the research credits, maximizing retirement plans and how we can do that through the tax code. So that's a natural part of the process. But after that, you have to start thinking, how else can I provide value to my client? And personal taxes is your one avenue that gets you out of the company, because most of them are flow-through clients. Yeah. So now I'm not talking about the company. Now I'm talking about individual X outside of the company and his family and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think Dave, to his credit too, all these clients usually have some weird nuanced things that comes up anyway. Like, hey, I heard I can do this, or hey, I'm going to trade for services for this or that. And so there's always like these one-off tax questions that pop up. And just, again, having somebody dedicated outside of the main relationship just to be able to come in and own that is huge, not only for the client, but for our delivery team as well. That's a huge relief off of the team. So
I can definitely agree with that. And I hope I don't have any former tax employees that I've worked with listening to this, but I think this is where Dave sets himself apart. Is I've brought him into several client meetings, and I actually enjoyed listening to him talk. Where for previous tax people I've worked with, I'm falling asleep, and I'm like, what the heck is this guy even talking about? And so I think that's really where Dave sets himself apart. Is a lot of times I'll just bring him into a meeting just to like change the tone a little bit and be like, okay, let's talk about the research credit, and let Dave do his thing, because he really wows every client we talk about. And we've talked about in previous podcasts about how we do the review system. We get reviews every month, and every time we get a green, I'm pretty sure Dave's name's mentioned because he does such a good job with that. So throwing that question at you, Adam, like how important was when you hired Dave, his personality and his ability to explain things to clients?
Oh, it was huge. I mean, for us, all of our hires are really centered around, and we've talked about this before. It's just the ability to relate to clients and stay relevant. And, it's hard to get in front of clients and talk. And then especially to be able to do it virtually adds just another layer to that. And so being able to communicate well, and also with the communication, just make sure it's timely, like follow-up has to be solid. And of course, everybody thinks they're good with that stuff. So that's kind of a TBD one, but he does great with, tracking everything. We use a tool called Trello. He's got several boards where he hawks everything and stays on top of everything, and, really tries to anticipate things before the client asks. I challenged him a couple years back, like, hey, what I don't want is to have a client ping me 2 weeks from now and ask me, hey, where's this at? Like what I'd like to see you do is be able to beat them to the punch every time. So he started putting due dates together and really being proactive with that. And I think he's done a fantastic job with that, and the clients really appreciate it.
This podcast is a great ego boost. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
We're doing what we can. You're getting ready to go to tax season, we need to build you up as much as possible.
When you offer CFO services, though, you are held to a higher standard versus what you used to be able to do. Like when we were in a traditional firm where perhaps we would, in tax season, you could just say, okay, I'm not going to ask client X for their QuickBooks file because I got enough going on my plate, and I know they can usually extend, and I can just push them off for a couple months. But now we are in their stuff daily, weekly. There's really no excuse why we can't have all their tax work done and clearly communicated in February, So, I mean, Adam, he said that much nicer than what he has told me before. He says, Dave, I do not want people surprised. Every business return is going to be done by March 15th. But it's a very reasonable expectation for our firm because we don't have to ask many questions. We have all their data. So we should be able to whip up the tax returns pretty quick.
9 out of 10 times when I've talked to tax people about what we do, they said, oh, that must be a dream. Tax returns must be so easy if you're in their books every month. You're in their books every week. It's easy to know what's going on. There are no surprises. So I can definitely, every tax person I've talked to is like, man, that must be the easiest tax return in the world to do. So
they are. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say that, I don't want to downplay my job, but when the books are pretty clean, it's, we can really whip up these returns pretty quick this time.
You don't have to herd the cats is the big thing. You have all the information. That's huge. I mean,
so let's talk about the future. So we've kind of talked about what we're currently doing. Dave, where do you see the future of your role going with Summit? What kind of services do you think you're going to provide over the next, 3, 5, 10 years?
Well, we hired a tax manager underneath me, which was a very nice hire this year. And that by hiring her, it allows me to get out of a lot of the weeds of preliminary review and things of that nature. So now I can look at more higher value issues with our clients. But with taxes, there's only so much you can talk about. So I did get certified, for financial planning over this year. So as our clients mature and if there's exit events, we want to be positioned to be able to continue that relationship after that. And then also, in those year-end meetings I was talking about with the estate plan is also insurance. So we also want to get licensed for some insurance planning as well, just because when we're talking to our clients so frequently, we have the opportunity to offer advice to them in all these different realms.
Yeah, that's going to be a big part of it, I think, going forward. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you're a CPA firm out there and you're super tax-centric right now, it's definitely a good feeder So we don't lead with that anymore, Jamie, to your earlier comment. But right now, you could kind of work through your list and figure out which clients are going to be ideal for VCFO services. They're typically going to be north of, you don't want to be the biggest ticket item on their plate. So they're normally going to be north of $2 million in revenue if they're a service-based business, north of $5 million if they're going to be like a manufacturing, that kind of a thing. But, once you talk to those clients and just start introducing them to the VCFO services. Hey, would you like help with forecasting and planning and kind of seeing ahead? They're naturally going to say yes. And then whenever you then backfill into, now I can enhance that tax compliance work, instead of just doing the projection, like I'll be more involved. I'll make sure these things are getting paid timely instead of getting that surprise at the end of the year and going, oh, you didn't make any of your quarterlies. Awesome. Well, you owe all this money. Like all that stuff's kind of off the plate. So the tax can still be a really good feeder for a lot of CPA firms. And then, like I said, then you can kind of whittle down those relationships and focus on the more core ones. And then, and then long term, as David mentioned, being the personal CFO is kind of where we see this evolving to. And there's lots of CPA firms that do really well at this, and they bring in financial advisors. And I don't think that's the direction that we're planning on taking our firm. What I want, ours is going to be more tax planning centric and more exit strategy centric. So ours is going to be more focused on, making sure those big holes are filled, and we're doing those more advanced things, which means Dave or I or anybody on our team is never going to be that person. Whenever you're getting into those higher end strategies, you really have to develop relationships, and we have relationships with several people that are specialists in different areas. So Dave's job is like a personal CFO is exactly like what it would be for our business CFO, which is quarterbacking the relationship. He doesn't have to be the person that's maintaining and filing the tax return for a captive. Like that's not our role. His role is understanding captives when they make sense, if it's a viable solution. Same thing with an exit strategy on a sale. Like when does it make sense to do a monetized installment sale? When doesn't it? What are the cost benefits? And then who is somebody that can take us from A to Z, cradle to grave, if you will, with the entire plan and does that stuff every day? That's really where we see the evolution of Dave's role turning from compliance to strategic, especially with the addition of this tax manager.
And it sounds like that's really closely tied to the CFO services as well. Like a lot of that information will come from meetings that Dave's not sitting in, that the CFOs can throw over to him and say, hey, this client's looking for an exit strategy. We're going to need you to jump in and talk about that when you talk about the tax planners. So it sounds like there's a really close relationship between those two services.
Yeah, it's all about getting sticky. Yep. And by having both of those relationships and being able to handle kind of the soup to nuts relationship, again, you don't have to do the taxes, but if you're involved in that process and you're doing that, you've just created more stickiness with the client, and it opens up the opportunity for those better planning things. So that's definitely the direction that I would like to see us go. And Dave's taken some pretty big steps forward and trying to map that out for us.
That sounds really exciting. I can think of a couple clients right now that I can, would really benefit from that. So that's great that we're going in that direction. So real quick, I'm going to plug our email address here. So if anyone has any topics they want us to talk about in the future, if they want to be a guest on the show, we do have an email address related to this podcast. And that email is cpa@summitcpa.net. Again, cpa@SUMMIT, cpa.net. So feel free to email us any topics, questions you have for us. But wanted to throw that out there. Any final thoughts? We're kind of getting close on time here. Anything we didn't talk about, Dave or Adam, that you guys want to talk about, or any other final thoughts related to tax that we can touch on real quick?
I think in closing, from the tax world, being a virtual CFO allows us to take a seemingly complex issue like taxes and get it in front of the client frequently, so it's not such a daunting task for them. And so if we can give them that peace of mind that they're taken care of for taxes throughout the year, it's not that big of an issue. And so if we can make that one crazy part of their life one less thing they have to worry about, which is what I think we do a good job at, then it's just another great value add that we can provide to our clients.
Yeah, and I would just add that's reciprocates to us. So it makes it easier for them, but in return, it makes it easier for us. Again, not having to herd the cats and be able to crank out returns that are super clean, which makes it really nice. So
great. Well, I definitely appreciate you coming on today, Dave. I'll definitely try to find more topics for you because I think you're a really good resource for us. I'll make sure we get you on this podcast in the future because I do think you can definitely help bring good topics to the podcast. So I appreciate you coming on. And Adam, as always, great job and appreciate you being here.
All right. Thanks.
Enjoy this episode? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving modern CPA firm success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.